Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the American Investor Show. Please click subscribe if this is your first time listening. From trader and CEO interviews to breaking news about companies you won't hear anywhere else, nobody does a better job at keeping you in the know when it comes to penny stocks. The term penny stock generally refers to a security issued by a very small company that trades at less than $5 per share. Penny stocks are extremely risky, yet they offer rates of return on investment not seen anywhere else. The host, guest, and callers are not registered financial advisors licensed by any government entity, and therefore, the following should be considered entertainment. The host, guest, and callers disclaim all liability in the event any information, commentary, analysis, opinions, advice, and/or recommendations prove to be inaccurate, incomplete, or unreliable, or result in any investment losses. Before investing in penny stocks, you should consult a professional to determine what strategy may be best for your individual needs. Now, without further ado, your host, LaSalle Anungu.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, loud and clear, right? Yeah, somebody told me check my mic. You guys can hear me loud and clear. I hope you enjoyed your trading day. And as I said yesterday, this market is going to continue to go lower. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened today. We had nice try, though. Nice try by the Bulls. Nice try by the Bulls for, they tried to play up the whole Fed announcement that they weren't going to make any adjustments in the short term. They tried to run on that, but there wasn't much buying after that situation. Here was the SPY 5-minute chart going into the day. Yep, there we go. We started right here. And we were basically sideways for the most of the day. When the Fed announcement dropped at 2, they tried to make a run for it. And sure enough, there was no buying above that 265 level. And they came crashing down back on that trend line that we created yesterday. All right. Remember this trend line that we created? Look, trend lines are real, guys. Trend lines are absolutely real. And sure enough, we had, the market sit on that trend line today. And as we've talked about on the show, when we have these patterns, right, declining highs, right, we're seeing lower lows developing here. And when we get this wedge pattern, this triangle pattern, what happens 9 times out of 10 is that you're going to break out or down to the flat side. And the flat side right now is at the bottom. So we're looking for us to break the trend that we created here, right? That's obviously in the chart. That's being respected by the market. Once we break this trend, which I believe it will be as soon as tomorrow, then we're going to be talking about possibly retesting some of these lows, which is that 253.52. All right. Absolutely. So I've got a special guest that we're going to be speaking with today about economics, about economic theory. Bats, if you want to knock out what you've got to say about the SPY now, give me a call because I want to get my guest in. So if you feel like you want to get that out the way now, let me know. All right. Remove the drawing tools. All right. Yes, got a special guest tonight. We're going to talk about economics in the age of Donald Trump. We're going to talk about free trade. We're going to talk about, policy. 919, Bats, what's going on, man?
Hey, Sal, how you doing, sir?
Good.
Quick call. So this week I'm scaled up on the SPY. As you know, I went in with small positions last week, the week before, I think the week before that, with $500. Mm-hmm. This week I scaled it up to 5,000. I was worried it wouldn't scale up. I must agree with you, though. Those commissions are pretty tough.
Absolutely.
Once you start buying 40, 50 options, you're looking at $30, $40, $45, you know, in a single trade, and up to, you know, $70 round trip trade. But yeah, I wanted you to bring up the chart for the SPY today. Bring up the 1 minute chart. Okay. Even the 5 minute is good, because the sell-off you just talked about, oh my God. So I'm onto something here. This is a very risky play. But then again, we have people putting, you know, a couple of $100 into OTC stocks.
Yeah.
But this play that I have for people, this can get you killer gains even more than OTCs. So you look at the last 2 hours, precisely, I think it was probably
yeah, it started literally at 2 o'clock. Yeah, right. As soon as the Fed dropped the announcement.
2:05. So I couldn't trade today because I wanted to try a single trade, like a single day trade, but I ran out of trades. I don't, you know, PDT rule, don't have the 25K. Got done with my 3 trades, but this trade was amazing, because if you'd come in at the 265.50 put, 265.50, and just held until the end of the day. Okay, so get this. This is where it's a bit risky, because this would have been a same-day expiration. So this is not to be attempted if you don't know what you're doing. But if you know what you're doing and you come in with a small position size, you could nail this and make huge gains. So I calculated that from if you'd come in at 265.50 with a same day expiration, so expiring today, if you'd ridden this thing all the way down, that would have been a 778% gain off of that. Because at the top where you bought those puts, if you bought that 265.50 put, that would have come at 32 cents. By the time it closed out, it was at $2.81.
Jeez.
$2.81 from 32 cents on a same-day expiration date. So, you know, I've been thinking about this for a while. Always look out, like, for the last 2 hours of trading. That's what I've seen, where if price is at the extremities for the day, like if it's either a new high or a new bottom, kind of like 2 hours to 1 hour before the market closes, what you want to do is go in the opposite direction. And this is key, because this is something I've been studying for maybe like 3 weeks now, and I noticed the SPY is notorious for that. So the last 2 hours of trading, if for instance, like today it was at 265.50, that was the new high of the day, you would put a put on that one. Yesterday, it came all the way down to nearly 262, which was the new low of the day. If you'd ridden that up as well, you'd be up like 150 or 200% if you just, you know, waited till it closed. So this, you know, forget about OTC stocks. This could be a play if the right setup comes. Wait 2 hours, you know, 1 to 2 hours before the market closes. If the price is on the extreme, either on the low side, you know, oversold, or on the high side, overbought, what you want to do is to play the opposite direction. Because if it's at the top, there's going to be a sell-off. If it's right at the bottom, people will be buying it up. And that's all I wanted to mention. You know, it's been a good week for me. 3 trades, 3 winners. Yesterday, I was close to losing, you know, 50% of what I put in. I was down $2,500. Managed to wait and come out with a $58 gain, but I didn't wait long enough, because had I waited till the close of yesterday, I would have been up $2,000. So it's often pertinent when you get into these trades, like, don't panic. I guess for me, I kind of panic because I'm picking the same week expiration.
Absolutely.
So I really don't want to hold it into the next day. But I found like wait until the day plays out. Don't panic. Don't sell out. Don't go for a loss. You need to keep calm and watch what's happening, and then maybe start panicking in power hour or in the last half hour. So those are the nuggets that I have for the SPY. I've got some other tricks that I've been looking at right now, but just on the SPY, man, I think I have maybe like 5 to 7 different strategies on how to play the SPY. But most important today, look at the last 2 hours of trading. If the SPY is on either oversold, overbought, new low or new high, look to play in the opposite direction, because like I said today, that was a 778% gain in the last 2 hours of trading. And that's all I have for you, Sal. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bats. I appreciate the call. Yeah, I mean, this is, and that's just common sense from Bats there. And making sure you have that, excuse me, that RSI on the screen as well, too, will help you. All right. Making sure you have that RSI on the chart, too, will help you. So let me call my buddy here. All right. Let me knock out Ken. All right, Ken, real quick. 845. What's going on?
Hey, Sal, it's Ken. How's it going?
What's going on with you, man?
That was really good advice from Bats.
Yes.
With that, I really appreciate that. Good stuff. Hello?
Yeah, Ken, you're on.
Go
ahead.
Yeah. I would say it was really good advice.
Absolutely.
Tricky. I wanted to just bring up quickly the BRKK. I got back into that stock today. I thought this morning I think it opened down to like 0.066, and then it turned around and went all the way up to like 10.2. It closed at 8.4. I thought, that's pretty cool. It seems strong to me. I mean, for a stock that ran from 2 cents to 11 cents between last week and yesterday, if it can base here for a few days, I think we go higher.
Yeah, let's see if we can hold that. You're well above the 21, and it's holding really well. Nice candlestick. Just maintain that volume. I think you can stay up there.
Yeah, getting a small float as well.
Very.
So we shall see. And notice that one more, the AXXA. That's that one that went from 0003 to hit a high of 37 this morning. But it closed down.
They're unloading. And look, if they're up that huge, you got people in this stock who are up 10 grand, 10,000% or more. So, look, they're unloading, and it just makes sense for them to be up there and to be selling right now.
Yeah, I want to mention to you, I have a newsletter I get, Brian Rich. It's a free letter I get each day, and he feels that these the SPY, the DIA, QQ, they're going to go test the 200-day, at least test like we did in February. That's another 3.5%.
I agree with him. I think the larger economic sentiment right now is it's people are very bearish. The case for longs right now is weak at best. And I think right now, look, take some money off the table and see what happens over the course of, the next couple months. And let's see where this market wants to go.
I just wish we'd just get a flush already. Get the flush, and then we can resume higher. And the last thing tonight, Bitcoin. Can you put up a chart of BTC?
Yeah, let's take a look at that. It's been a minute. Let me see here. BTC. All right, BTC USD. We're at 9,200 right now.
So that chart, what this guy Ched's trading, he's pretty good. He's on Twitter all the time. He's been insisting we've got to break that 9,500 to break out of the downtrend that was established from December till now. What do you think? I've been using that to guide me to get in or out of these penny stocks like the BTSC, and I'm on the sidelines, but I think
as long as it stays above the 50 RSI, man, you're gonna be looking at possibly getting that breakout. It's been for right now a very healthy run, and as long as buyers are coming in and there are more buyers than sellers, then you have an opportunity. But if if that RSI starts to take a dip and starts to challenge that 50 line, then I don't know what could happen if that happens again. I don't think it's going to be pretty for Bitcoin if you go back underneath that line again.
Yeah, I agree. I happen to one more thing I saw in your chat room, the IMT. I saw that one went up 1,000% today on short squeeze. It's crazy market, huh? You're getting these
I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, that the alert went on Black Box for that at like 10 a.m.
It did. What price?
Insane call. Everybody on Black Box made money on that one. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. Everybody wanted a piece of this. The liquidity was unmatched. And, in the stock, this is something that barely trades at all. All of a sudden, it had almost, 1 million people going in and out, or 1 million trades or more going in and out. I had never seen a level 2, like that on this stock. And, congrats to everybody who was in it. You might have another chance at more tomorrow. But, I mean, what a gain, man. What a gain.
Well, that black box really does pay for itself, as you've been talking about for months and months.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Good stuff. Well, I'm going to listen to your guest. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I mean, the IMTE, guys, that, it's good and it's bad because, you got a guy out there who probably just started trading today and he went into the stock, he went big, and now every single thing that runs, he's going to chase. So, blessing and a curse at the same time. But IMTE, boy, that was an account changer for somebody out there today. For somebody out there today, that was truly an account-changing moment for them. All right? For them. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right? So let me call my guest because I've been wanting to have him on. I'm so happy that I have the opportunity to bring him on. Let me give him a call right now. Let me give him a call right now. All right. Let me see that. All right. 1 second. I'll give him a call. Hey, John, is you on?
Oh, I think you got me.
Oh, this is Ken. My bad, Ken. Sorry about that, bro. Hold on. I appreciate you, Ken. Well, let me hang up on you. I called Ken back. Hold on. Let me, there we go. I freaking called Ken back. All right, let me go. This is better. There we go. This is better. All right. Hey, John, are you on?
Yes. Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So this is a good friend of mine, ladies and gentlemen. I'll let him introduce himself, but just to give you a little bit of background, this man I consider to be the smartest guy in the room wherever he's at. I went to middle school with this guy. I went to a little bit of high school with this guy before I moved to another town, but I stayed in touch. Incredible mind. I think you guys will get that idea, just hearing him and his ideas. He's recently written an incredible book that I want you guys to take advantage of and buy called Say No to Big Government, My Case for Maximum Freedom. He describes himself as a libertarian. First, let me let him describe himself. John, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you today?
Hi, I'm doing real well, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show.
Thank you for coming on, bro. And tell the people a little bit about yourself and how you became a libertarian before we get started.
Yeah, well, what inspired me to become interested in economics in the first place was the financial crisis that we had a decade ago. And back then, I knew nothing. All I heard was a lot of companies were failing. I heard that General Motors and the auto industry was about to go down for the count. They were talking bankruptcy. They were talking going out of business. No one ever thought that was something that could happen, that the big three, which have been around for a century, could actually go out of business. We were talking about so many people who were going to lose their life savings. The President of the United States came on the air in the fall of 2008 and said, we've got ourselves the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression, and that if we don't do something about it, we're going to see millions of people losing their jobs. We're going to see millions of people losing their life savings. We're going to see so much carnage, so many people losing their pensions. I mean, it was like the Armageddon speech of Armageddon speeches. And I was there and I watched it live, and I had no idea what was going on, but I wanted to get to the bottom of it. So that led to years of research into economics and history, and led to me looking up a lot of different people who had a lot of opinions about what was happening. I started learning that this crisis was something of our own making as a country. Too much government, too much regulation, too many distortions in the market that were created by central banks and by governments. And it led us to creating a situation we couldn't sustain, and it had to implode. And once I learned that, and then I realized we were actually handling the financial crisis by doing more of the same that started it, I just said, man, we are in for an even bigger financial crisis than what we had a decade ago. And that was the beginning of putting this book together so that people could actually understand what the problem was, not just in causing the financial crisis, but in causing what has been the last 50 years or so, a period of slowing economic growth, decreasing prosperity, more and more people who can't make it out there, can't pay their bills, can't afford to go to school, can't afford to pay for health care, can't afford to buy a house. I mean, you name it. Prosperity has been declining over the last 50 or so years, and it's because we have too much government, which is why my book is titled, Say No to Big Government. I go through I got 6 chapters in the book where I go through the history going back to the beginning of our country, and even before, where I get to how we got to this point where it seems like we're smothered in government, smothered in taxes, regulations, inflation, all the things that are destroying our prosperity every single day and threaten to demolish it even more for the next generations to come.
Wow, that's very, very interesting, John. And again, it was so important to bring you on because I really want people who listen to me, many of them beginners, many of them relatively new to trading, to have an understanding of at least the fundamental basic tenets of neoclassical economics that our way of life is kind of based on, right? And we have a gentleman that very, very popular, and Kanye West. I'm sure you've heard what's been going on with him. It looks like he's been introduced to some of the things I want to lead into, were basically just kind of a new way of thinking, a new outlook, right? And he's not really doing a good job of really putting it together, but he's obviously been red-pilled out there. Can you speak a little bit, because I know you're not a conservative, but I know you get bunched up in that. What do you guys see that other people think is so dangerous in him? What excites you about what he's going through?
Well, I don't think a lot of people in the media who get a lot of attention know exactly what they're saying. It's unfortunate because it seems like all you need to do is be famous, and you say something provocative, and people will believe you. And that is very dangerous because there's so much deception going on out there. You know, when you have a big microphone, when you have a name recognition, there's almost a tendency to just think that that person is correct when they talk. And I think Kanye West is going to have definitely some explaining to do. He's going to probably be asked, what did you mean? You know, you talk about slavery, I think he said, sounds like a choice or something like that. People are going to want to know, okay, man, what did you think? Were you just joking, or were you just kind of not thinking? I think he wasn't thinking, by the way. But I don't think he's going to be able to really explain this to the satisfaction of anybody, what he meant, because I don't think he even knew what he was saying. In fact, I can't even interpret what he meant. And you know, this is an issue with a lot of people in the news who just, you know, when they get an opportunity, you wonder, are they just trying to provoke people, or are they onto something? So I want to hear more about this statement that slavery was a choice. I still don't quite get where he's going to, but I'll bet you this. If you ask any of those slaves if it was a choice, they would say, I wish it was a choice. I wish we had the ability to just say yes or no to this, because they would all say no on day one. You know, I want to hear more, and I think that over the next few days or weeks, this is going to be something that people demand to hear more about.
So you don't see him as a voice to engage what some people would say a brainwashed group of people into the idea of radical kind of economic and political thought. You don't see Kanye West as that guy.
No, because really he doesn't have a track record. I mean, what has he been doing? You know, he's a hip hop artist. He knows how to sell music. He is not the kind of guy I would think of when I think of an intellectual or somebody who's out there trying to educate people about economics, about history. Let me tell you who I do think of when I think of people like that. I think of somebody like Dr. Walter Williams. I think of somebody like a Dr. Thomas Sowell. I think of somebody like a Dr. Milton Friedman. These are people who've spent their lives trying to educate people. They've written books. They've traveled around the country. Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams are black, by the way, and that makes them even more unique because you hardly find any people who are libertarian who are black, and they are true. They're true rarities, the true fighters of freedom, but they're out there trying to help people understand really how the world works. Kanye West is somebody who makes music. He's an entertainer. He is not trying to educate. He's trying to entertain, and there's a big difference between the two.
Absolutely. And John, let's get into how economics works in this country, right? Because you know, you've got, you know, you talked about slowing economic growth. You talked about the fact that people are struggling to find work, you know, but at the end of the day, you know, we got, for example, this Senator Bernie Sanders. He was the hottest thing, right, the last couple of years. He's still out here really changing and creating minds in young people who believe in his message. As traders, right, we're people who go to the markets to get capital, right, to make money, to take advantage of America's economic engine. But you've got some people who see what we do as evil, as wrong. Explain a little bit about why why our economics works the way it is, and why it's not working effectively, or the way you believe it is.
Well, I think it all goes back to government. Government policy has been manipulating the economy in frightening ways, because causing the economy to become more dysfunctional. And here's one example. The government back in the early 1970s did something that changed our whole country forever. They abandoned what was called the gold standard. Now, this is something I talk a lot about in my book. The gold standard, to make it easy for people to understand, it was a monetary system that prevented our government from going into debt, going into too much debt, spending money that it couldn't pay back. The way that it worked was that the government could only print money that was backed by gold, meaning you could only have as much money in circulation as you had gold supplies. So if you said, well, we're going to print $20 million, and each dollar will be backed by 1 ounce of gold, then you better have 20 million ounces of gold in your supply. And you can't print any more money beyond that. So what gold did was it restrained the government from spending too much money and from creating too much inflation. What this did was it allowed businesses to become more productive. The cost of business would fall. They could produce more goods, and the prices of those goods would fall. And falling prices are what allows people to save more money. When they save more money, that's capital that goes back into the economy. That's capital that we can use for new businesses, for job creation, for economic growth. Well, the government back in the 70s wanted to spend more money than it could spend from collecting taxes. They wanted to spend more money than they could spend just from selling bonds. So what they did was they terminated the gold standard, and by doing that, it allowed them to print as much money as they wanted. Now, whatever they want to spend, they can spend on, and all of the inflation that comes from that is going to come into the economy, and it's going to make everything more expensive, meaning it's going to cost you more to buy a house, cost you more to buy food, to buy energy, to buy health services, to purchase health services, education services, and this is the reason why people can't seem to keep up. It almost doesn't matter how much education they get. They can't seem to earn enough money to keep up with inflation. Real wages have stayed flat for 4 to 5 decades because inflation keeps on eating up all the income gains that people make. So this is one way that the government has really turned the economy upside down, because it is destroying economic growth by destroying the value of our money through inflation. And with inflation, it doesn't matter how much money you make. If inflation stays in line with your income, you will never earn enough money to take care of yourself. It's one of the saddest things about what has happened over the last 50 years. And it's just one of the things that the government has done over the last century and over the last 50 years that has made it harder for everyone, especially the poor, especially blacks, especially immigrants, especially people at the bottom, to make a living and prosper in this country.
Wow, absolutely. Very, very interesting, John. And speak a little bit to, because now let's talk about the poor, right? Let's talk about how, welfare policy in particular, and this is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, and it's been a while since we've talked about this, John. Welfare policy in America, you believe is broken. Tell a little bit, people, how it works in America and how you think it should work.
Well, welfare is something we've always had. It is something we have now, and it is something we will have in the future, and I'm 100% for it. Welfare is just people taking care of each other, people taking care of other people. I'm 100% for that. I wish we would do more, but what I do not like is government welfare programs. These began in the 1930s. That's when government welfare was introduced for the first time nationally. It was during the Great Depression. The program, what was it called? The ABC program, a program that was created mainly for women who had children who were married to a man who either died or became incapacitated or left the family, and therefore the income that the man earned was gone. The ABC program, which was developed really to help women not have to go take a job. They would get money from the government to replace the income that the man was earning if in fact he left the family or became too ill or injured to work or died. In the 1960s, that all changed because the civil rights movement comes in and starts to do a lot of good things in terms of dismantling Jim Crow and dismantling barriers that were up since the end of Reconstruction to blacks to participate in society. Those barriers were being done away with. But there was a dark side. And the dark side was that the civil rights movement ended up merging with the progressive movement. The progressive movement was the union movement that began in the 19th century, that introduced all these taxes and regulations. And once the civil rights movement accomplished getting the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, then they switched over to now trying to produce social justice, economic justice. They started to promote welfare, and they wanted fewer restrictions on welfare. And with that came the decline of the family. We started seeing more broken homes, more people leaving, more men leaving the home because welfare comes in, and instead of a woman needing to marry a good man with a good job so that their whole economic situation could be better, all she needed was to qualify for the welfare. And to qualify, you need to have children, and you need to have an income that falls under a certain level, and you can get welfare. And there were no restrictions on it during the 60s. No restrictions during the 1970s or 80s and early 90s. Some people were collecting welfare for 25 years because there were no time limits, no work requirements. It was free money. Of course, nothing's free, but it was free for them. And they could collect because during the 1960s, the welfare system, which was heavily restricted from the 1930s to the 1960s, was becoming less restricted. And with that, it became more open, more people could collect, more people did not need to get married, more people did not have to be responsible in terms of how many children they had, what job they had. It produced dysfunction that continues to this very day. And that is the legacy of government welfare programs.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. John, wow. Because, you know, you can say, right, and from the research I've done, we know why many of those actors, you know, during during the civil rights time period, that fight for equality, many of them were educated a lot of times outside of America, right? And they were sponsored by groups outside of America, predominantly from Europe, right? Eastern Europe, as well as, you know, even France and England, and as you said, from progressive groups.
Yeah, absolutely.
Many of those countries at the time were, you know, undergoing their own kind of issues where they were really getting knee-deep in cooperative economics, right? The idea of community-based economics and you know, streaming away from what we have here in America, this neoclassical system that we have. Can you tell us, speak to like the failure of community-based economics and why, you know, in our country today, many, particularly poor people, African Americans, still believe that, hey, if we just all come together and we just all do business among each other, that kind of community-based economic system, it doesn't work and leads to failure?
Well, the idea of, I think what you're saying is centralization, trying to have some kind of system where there's a central authority that's trying to organize people. Well, this does lead to more government control. You know, government, when you talk about government, we're not just as I talk about in my book, Say No to Big Government, I'm not just talking about the federal government. I also talk about state and local government. And whether it's state or local or federal government, it's all the same. It's just three different levels of government, but they all do the same thing. They use force. They require you to pay taxes. They require you to do something that might not even be in your best interest. And the best way to organize resources in a society is through free market capitalism, where people basically decide who they're going to buy from, what they're going to pay, who they're going to sell to, how much they're going to sell for. In other words, people deciding that they're going to voluntarily exchange resources with each other without the state coming in and dictating what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, what price they're going to do it for. In the issue of welfare, we've always had welfare in the form of nonprofit organizations. Nonprofit organizations would simply collect money, dues, payments from their, donations from their members, and that money would be available for whatever the members of that organization agreed on. You can build a school, and that was done many, many times throughout history. You can build a hospital. You can build roads. You can provide money for the poor. You can provide all kinds of social services. This is the history of America. People did this voluntarily with their own money. And, they would work a job. They would take, a portion of their income. They would pay each month to an organization that would further their goals. This is the way that people should seek to gain the goods and services they want. in this country. But what people tend to do instead is they want there to be a centralized authority to come in and do all the organizing for them, do the collection of income, collection of resources, collection of money for them. And the problem is that you lose your power. Because you're giving it to the state, you're giving it to a politician, you're giving it either to your mayor or your governor or your president or your senators or your congressmen. And the only thing they care about is getting elected and getting reelected. And, community organizing should never, ever be in the hands of government. It should never, whether it's a city or a county or a state, that really should be left to individual people who could find common ground on an issue and put their resources together to achieve their goal. Our country used to be like that, and we grew economically more. I would say from the late 18th century to the early 20th century, this country had the greatest period of economic growth and prosperity in its history, and it had a government that for the most part did very little, had very little money, very little power, stuck to the Constitution the way it's supposed to, and simply allowed the people to decide how they were going to live their lives and how they were going to relate with one another, socially, economically, and so on. So I think when people decide that they want to do some kind of community organizing, they should be very wary of going to the state, going to a city, going to a government for that, because that's when you start to lose your power. That's when you start to lose your ability to influence your own destiny.
Absolutely. And John, so obviously you're probably not in favor of a minimum wage, right? I mean, right now, many states are changing laws, right? We've got some New York City, I think 2022, it's going to be $18. I mean, enforcing these minimum requirements for employers or wannabe employers to pay individuals who want to work for them. The idea is that these minimum wages are being placed to help workers be able to make it, right? To be able to have a full-time job and have a place to live, have things they need to get by. What do you think is wrong with having a minimum wage, and why do you think we should not have it? From what I remember us having that conversation.
Yeah, I agree. I'll put it this way. I agree with Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who has published several best-selling books on different subjects in economics. And what he said is that the minimum wage is the most anti-Negro law on the books of this land. Direct quote. The reason he said that is because it does probably better than most other regulations at stopping black people, and not just blacks, but anyone who's in the low-skilled category when it comes to employable skills. It keeps them from getting a job because it simply makes them more expensive. We need to remember labor is just like any other commodity. You make it more expensive, you're going to see less consumption of it. We have to also look at businesses as consumers. Businesses are going to consume less of anything that becomes too expensive. And look at it from the standpoint of what you or I or anybody else would do when the price of gasoline gets too high. We're going to consume less. We're going to drive less. We're going to figure out ways to avoid buying gas because it'll just cost too much. What would we do when the cost of certain foods gets too expensive? We buy less. We look for alternatives. we're going to consume less. Anytime you raise the price of something, you get less consumption of it. Labor is a commodity, and businesses are consumers. And when you tell a business you can't hire this person unless you pay them $5, $10, $15 an hour, well, what if that person is only worth $1, $2, $3 an hour? You're actually putting that person in a position where they cannot get what they want. They may be okay with taking a job for $2 an hour. Now, that might sound absurd today because, people are not making it off $7.25. That's the federal minimum wage. But it shouldn't be up to anyone other than that person whether or not they take a job for a certain wage. By the way, you go back 100 years ago, $2 an hour was money you could live off of. So it all has everything to do with inflation. But the idea that the government can decide what someone should get paid on a job, that is frightening. I want to be able to say that if somebody offers me for 2 cents, I want to be able to say yes or no to that job. I don't want a third party like the government to come in and tell me what I can and cannot have in that situation. If I feel someone's not paying me enough, I will either ask for more or I will seek another job, and I will get many different offers from other businesses to work for them if, in fact, my wage really is too low. That's the way the market handles everything. It's competition. Competition is the reason why you don't need a minimum wage to see people earn more. Because if business A, for example, says, I'm going to give you $3 an hour to do this, business B says, well, I'm going to give you $4. Which one are you going to take? You're going to take 3 or you're going to take 4? If it's for the same job, you're going to take 4. If business C says, well, we want you to work for us, we're going to give you $5. Business D comes and says, well, how about you forget all of them? Work for us. We're going to give you $10. That's how wages move up in the economy. You have competition. Businesses want workers, and when they want workers, they're going to give them some reason to get employed by them. They're going to give them an incentive. You don't need the government to come in to raise wages. It would be better if the government stayed out, because competition raises wages. And keep in mind also, we did not have a minimum wage law in this country until the 20th century. We did not actually start seeing a national minimum wage law until the 1930s. Wages rose dramatically during the 19th and early 20th century. And real wages rose more during that time than they have over the last 50 years. And this is without a minimum wage law. So the history of this says that you don't need a minimum wage to see wages rise. What you need is free market competition among businesses, and you need an economy that's able to grow and create jobs and create opportunities, and then you'll have businesses actually raising pay voluntarily so that they can get the workers that they need. That's all you need is competition. You don't need a minimum wage.
Wow. And John, I the research again I've done, one thing you do notice is that black people were practically at full employment before the enact of the minimum wage law in this country. I mean, practically full employment. It was almost difficult to find black workers. I mean, because they were always working. I mean, it's not like today where you find, you drive through different neighborhoods and there are guys just literally sitting around because they can't find work.
Oh, it was. You're 100% correct about that. And black, in some cases, in many cases, blacks actually had a higher employment rate than whites. And I'm going to give you an example. During the Industrial Revolution, you could say late 19th century, early 20th century, people who were poor had a higher unemployment rate, a higher employment rate, than those who were less poor. Poverty drives people to employment. Child labor, for example. Black children had a higher labor participation rate from 1880 to 1930. They had a higher labor participation rate than white children. And the reason for that is because they were poor. When you are poor, your family spends so much more money on food. And therefore, as a percentage of your income, more of it goes to food, and therefore, it becomes more of a desperate situation to make money, because most of your money, or a larger percentage of your money, is going to food. You can't afford to have people sitting around not working. You have to have as many people working to produce the money you need for your food. And as a result, poorer families had higher labor participation rates among their children because they were earning less, and therefore they needed to work longer, work more hours, have more people working. This is not just true in terms of black children versus white children. It's also true for immigrant children versus native-born children. Immigrant children had a higher labor participation rate than native-born children, because immigrant children are poorer than native-born children. You had a higher labor participation rate among children who lived in the country versus children who lived in the city, because children who lived in the country were poorer than those who lived in the cities. So wherever there's more poverty, you actually have a higher employment rate, because employment is much more necessary. Working more hours, having more people working is more important, because it's a matter of survival. And that continued throughout the entire Industrial Revolution. I think we should all thank God that we did not have minimum wage laws during the time of the Industrial Revolution, because if we did, there would have been so much more suffering, so much more poverty, so many more people who would have probably starved or been in a more terrible situation economically than they already were at the time. So we have to always keep in context what kind of laws that we have today didn't we have back then, and what were the results. And the results, like you said, we had a higher unemployment rate back then than we do today. So, and back then we didn't have all of these regulations. We didn't have minimum wage. We didn't have all of these taxes, all of these licensing laws that say you can't get a job, you can't start your business unless you have a license, unless you have a certification or some permit. Can you believe that you have to have a permit in many cities just to have a lemonade stand? I mean, that's absurd. You want to have a lemonade stand, maybe raise money for a good cause, and you are breaking the law in many cities because you don't have a permit that costs $200 to set up your stand, or to shovel snow. You have to get a permit in some cities across the country to shovel snow. You might want to earn money to take care of some bills, and the wintertime comes and you have an opportunity to shovel snow for somebody who's willing to pay you. But if you don't have a permit from the city and you get caught shoveling snow, you could actually be cited. You could be ticketed, or worse. It has happened. I have a scenario in my book where I talk about some people from New Jersey who tried to shovel snow for people in 2 years ago, because there was a huge snowstorm that hit New Jersey 2 years ago. And some teenagers were trying to shovel snow, and the police came to them and said, "You guys, do you have a permit?" And they said no, and they said, "Oh, we can't let you shovel snow." And the permit cost, guess how much? over $400.
Jeez.
Over $400 for a permit to shovel snow. I think the town is called Bound Brook, New Jersey, and it's in my book. I have a section on welfare in Chapter 6 where I talk about this. A $400 permit, and it's only good for 6 months. And then you have to pay another $400 to renew it, just to shovel snow for somebody. This is exactly the type of regulations that we have in this country that are holding so many people down. The poor are hurt by these the most because it's the poor who need to make the money the most. They're trying to survive, and they cannot make it when the government comes in and says, sorry, if you don't give us $500, you can't go and get a job. You can't go into business for yourself. You can't sell lemonade. You can't shovel snow. You can't do this, you can't do that, unless you basically pay us a tax. You know, every permit, every light, it's all a tax in disguise. And that's one of the great tragedies of all these regulations, whether they're minimum wage, permitting laws, city ordinances that say you can't do this or that, you can't have a garage sale. There are city ordinances that actually limit how many garage sales you can have in a year. Mm. So it's, again, you're just trying to make money, earn a living, pay bills, and the government comes in and stops you just because they can. And this is the kind of stuff I want people to be aware of. You're hurting the poor. You're hurting no matter who it is, but you're disproportionately hurting blacks, disproportionately hurting immigrants, disproportionately hurting people who are at the bottom economically, because of this idea that you want to protect people or maintain a certain social system, so you stop people from actually being able to earn a living with all these ridiculous regulations. It's really sad.
Wow, it's horrible, man. Just the way you put it, bro, it's just like it's all truth, man. And let's get into the Commander-in-Chief, our President, Donald J. Trump. One, what do you think about him? Two, is he doing enough to destroy the chains of regulation on this country? Or is he too little too late?
Oh, yeah, I think you just said it. I think it is too little too late. I think he made an attempt last year, this tax bill. Let me say something about that, because this tax bill was, here's the way I see it is, it was something, but it was so far below what we needed to have. What he did, when he signed the tax bill into law, he gave the corporations a big tax cut. I'm all for it. He cut the tax rate from 35% to 21%. Now, that was good, and that was a big tax cut. But then, when it came to cutting taxes on individual people, he gave them very tiny tax cuts. For example, the top tax rate, which was 39.6%, was cut all the way down to 37%. Hardly anything. I think the second highest tax rate was 33%. He cut that tax rate all the way down to 32%. Big tax cut, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. And many people didn't get a tax cut at all. The poorest people, the people who were at the bottom tax rate, that tax rate for the people in the lowest income level who are paying income taxes, that tax rate was 10%. No cut whatsoever. He did not cut the taxes, the people paying the lowest tax rate. So it stayed at 10%. And there were two other tax brackets that received no cuts at all. For those that did receive a cut, it's a temporary tax cut. It actually expires in 8 years. So it's not even a full tax cut in the sense that it's a tiny tax cut, and it doesn't even last but for 8 years. The corporations get a tax cut that is big, 35% down to 21%, and it's permanent. Individuals get a tiny tax cut of 1 to 2%, and it's temporary. So my problem is that he was not fair with that. What he should have done is say everyone's going to see a tax cut of 30%, or everybody's going to get a tax cut of 50%. To make it fair, give everybody the same chunk of their taxes reduced. Instead, he picked and chose who he was going to get the biggest tax cuts to. I'm glad we got some tax cuts there, but they weren't fair because everybody did not get the same proportion of their taxes reduced. At the same time, he signs, I think a few months ago or a few weeks ago, he signed a spending bill that's going to add another $1.3 trillion to the U.S. debt. Now, this just further confirms that our president, Donald Trump, is either clueless about how to, make things right economically, or does not really seem to care much, because why would you cut taxes and then spend more money? What you're supposed to do, what he should have done, is he should have cut taxes and then cut spending. He should have said, I'm not going to sign a single spending bill that adds $1 to the debt. I'll tell you, if I were president, I would have said, I'm vetoing every single bill that comes to me that adds $1 to the debt. And I will let the government shut down. And I will even let the government default before I add another $1 to the U.S. debt. He had a chance to take a stand and say, we're not going to dig ourselves into more debt. He failed. He absolutely failed. It was one of the biggest disappointments so far of his presidency. The tax bill, I felt, was mixed, some good, some bad, but then he signs a spending bill that adds more than $1 trillion to our debt, just so that the government wouldn't shut down. I'll tell you, he missed a big opportunity to really stand for fiscal responsibility. He missed an opportunity to do what was in our best interest as a country. And this is going to come up again, I think, later this year, maybe around September. This is going to happen again. He's going to be presented with another spending bill to keep the government open. And he said he's not going to sign that bill again. I think we should wait and see about that, because he's already made it clear that he's willing to add more money to our debt. He's willing to add more debt to our budget. And he said he won't do it again. But unfortunately, I think he has a track record of not following through on a lot of things he says.
Wow. And John, you talk about, letting the government default. Can you explain why the government going bankrupt or defaulting would actually be a good thing? Can you explain why that would be a good thing?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. First of all, if we were to default, what that would mean is we are making a decision to say, look, we just don't have the money to pay on this debt. We have to declare bankruptcy. I mean, that's really what a default is you are saying to your creditors, we wish we could pay you, but the money's not coming in. So we have to declare bankruptcy. And that is what happens every single day in America. You heard about what happened with Toys R Us. Been around for, 70 years, I think? Mm-hmm. And they are out of business now. They declared bankruptcy before this year. They tried to restructure their debt. They tried to, change the company a little to make it more profitable, cut costs, and it was an attempt to try to make Toys R Us viable again as a business. Well, it didn't work. Toys R Us just does not have the money coming in. They don't have the customers. They don't have the revenue. And they realized that last year and made a decision that they've got to go out of business. They just can't stay. They have to basically default and tell their creditors, sorry, we can't pay you. We're not making enough money. It happens all the time. Borders Bookstore. You remember Borders Bookstore from many years ago. They disappeared a decade ago. Circuit City, another business that went down. It happens all the time. When you don't have the money to pay your debts, you have to declare bankruptcy and say we can't pay. That is what the U.S. government needs to do. And you know what? It would eliminate so much debt. We have $21 trillion on the federal government books that it has already racked up. And how much tax revenue do we have coming in? About $3 trillion. But we're spending $4 trillion. So we're adding $1 trillion to the debt each year. There is no way we can pay this debt back. And again, that's not counting Social Security and Medicare. If you count Social Security and Medicare together, that's another $55 to $60 trillion that is those two programs are gonna cost us over the next several years and decades, on top of the $21 trillion that we already have racked up. So the government cannot pay its debts. And that is why we need to admit that. Default, let the economy implode as far as it needs to implode, so that this, and of course we need to go to a system where the government cannot spend so much money. Bring back the gold standard, a system that prevented government from printing too much money and creating too much debt. You know, if we were to default and then go back to a more restrained financial policy, a more restrained monetary system, that would allow our country to rise again. It would allow for us to eliminate the debt that hurts investment. The more debt you have, the less you invest. Mm-hmm. So, because investment, you know, you got to pay your creditors. Well, imagine how much more money you could spend on so many other things if you didn't have to pay a creditor. And we have so many creditors. I think we're paying $200 to $300 billion of interest per year, the federal government. Mm-hmm. It hurts investment. It takes away your ability to invest in new things. It's like a tax. Debt is like a tax. It takes money out of your pocket. And that's the reason why we're growing so slowly. One of the reasons. Too much debt. We've got to wipe this debt out. And the fastest way to wipe it out is with a default. And it would be painful, and the economy would implode, and unemployment would go up, and you'd have a lot of people losing their jobs and losing their life savings. But it would be a temporary thing, and we would get over it, and we would come back stronger than before if we adopt the right types of policies after we default.
And John, I got a question in the chat room. Someone said, what would happen to, Bob the postman? I mean, what would happen to government workers? And I know, you've got something to say on government workers in general. I mean, you don't even believe that the government should be even in the business of handling mail, or so. Kind of speak to that that idea of the government worker or the postal worker, kind of that idea that government is in the business of employment.
Yeah, well, you've got private companies that deliver packages, deliver mail, UPS, FedEx, many other private companies that do at a lower cost and a higher level of efficiency the very same things that the government does. The idea that you need the government to deliver the mail, it's funny because the post office is on its way into bankruptcy, while you've got the private companies that are in much better financial shape. All you need, if you want to send a package or send mail, anyone can start a business doing that. The idea that the government has to do that now, you might say, well, this goes back many generations, but so what? There's a lot of traditions that we have in this country that were never good, that we never should have had. And the private sector can take care of anything that the government does. I would say that it takes care of the same things that government does at a lower cost and at a higher level of productivity. So the postman, let's say he loses his job. Let's say they cut the post office. Well, you know what he would do? He would simply go and get a job working for one of the private companies and say, I've got a lot of experience driving a truck around delivering, and he could very easily take a job working at one of the other private companies, or he could start his own company. He could say, look, I know what I'm doing. I've got this experience. I can start my own delivery service and do the very same things that I was doing for the government, make a profit, and be better off and not have to worry about government rules and regulations. There are companies that deliver. I don't know if you've ever heard of Grubhub. You've probably heard of that. This is a delivery service for food from restaurants. Mm-hmm. You order from a restaurant, and they will pick it up for you and bring it to your house. Maybe you don't want to go out to the restaurant, and you just want the food. You want to eat the restaurant food at home. They will. You pay a fee. They will get your food for you. Meals on Wheels. Now that's something that the government funds. But if they were to stop funding it, it would still receive funding. And I can say that because last year the government threatened to cut funding for Meals on Wheels. I talk about this scenario in my book. You know what happened? The number of people volunteering to work for Meals on Wheels went up. The amount of money that the program was collecting from private citizens who were donating, that went up. If the government were to cut funding for something that people want, it isn't going to go away. People are still going to put money into it. If the government were to cut funding for any organization or any business that it funds, and the people want the services of that organization, they will fund it themselves. And the same applies to the post office. The government, I think they should just sell the post office, auction it to a private company, and the private company will allocate the resources, reorganize the post office. It would become a private company, and it would do better than it ever did under government. So I'm all for just privatizing most of the government. I would say 90% at least of the government's agencies and departments should be privatized, should be sold off to private investors, or abolished altogether. And you would see the private sector take control of those very things and do so much more with them than ever seen before.
Wow. Incredible stuff. All right, and John, let's go through some of the things that I've seen here in the chat room. Again, it's been a pleasure having you. I know I'm taking everything out of you, bro, but I really appreciate you being here.
No, man, I love it. This is exactly what I want to do. I live to give people knowledge, and I want people to be inspired to at least get into the issues, because this affects them. This is a daily thing. You know, when you go to pay your bills and you realize, man, I don't have enough money, you're going to wonder what's going on, and I want people to know what's going on.
Absolutely. We got a guy talk about Bitcoin. He said, look, the government's going broke. That's why I'm buying cryptocurrencies and I'm loading up in cryptocurrencies. Tell me your thoughts about cryptocurrencies and whether or not they actually even have a place in our our economics.
I think cryptocurrency. Well, the thing is, cryptocurrencies are a response to the dollar losing its value, and not just the dollar, but currencies around the world are losing their value. Cryptocurrencies are supposed to be an alternative currency that doesn't lose its value, that maintains its value. And I think that definitely we need to see how much more time, we need to see exactly how much more these cryptocurrencies will maintain their value over a longer period of time. So far, they're being used to basically protect from the devaluation of the dollar. That's why Bitcoin, for example, I think started in 2012. And in the first few years of Bitcoin, it didn't make hardly any money. Over the last few years or so, Bitcoin has just skyrocketed. And that's because, once a few people start to invest and the price starts to rise, it attracts more investors, more people put their money into it, and the price rises even faster, and it feeds on itself. So Bitcoin and many other cryptocurrencies are simply places for people to make a fortune off of speculation, and I have no problem with them. But they wouldn't exist if the dollar maintained its value. These cryptocurrencies would not exist. In fact, the dollar was supposed to grow. The dollar's value is supposed to go up, because if you have a fixed currency supply and businesses become more productive, what happens is the price of goods falls. When the price of goods fall, the value of currency goes up automatically. If the government were doing its constitutional duty to maintain the value of the money, I don't believe any of these cryptocurrencies would have existed. They exist because so many of these currencies all over the world are falling in value. And it's not just Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, it's stocks, it's gold and silver and real estate. All of these things have been going up for the last decade because the dollar and the euro and the yen and many other currencies around the world have been dropping because the governments are printing too much money, because they don't care about the value of the money. All they care about is spending for today, and they don't care about the inflation they're going to create tomorrow by spending all this money today. So I say cryptocurrencies are just the result of bad monetary policy throughout the world.
Wow. Interesting insight there. Interesting insight. Speaking of real estate, because I have questions on that as well. We, in the past, John, we've had conversations about how you feel that real estate in America has just basically gone awry. The idea that we have, the basic home being, $180,000, $200,000. How, not too long ago, people bought homes, with cash out of their pocket, right? They could actually afford to buy it outright.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We have something called the FHA. You can go there. You can get loans. Speak to the FHA and the kind of, the bigotry that, they've been a part of in the past, locking people out, but now the incredible destruction and manipulation they've done in regards to real estate prices nationwide.
Absolutely. I talk about the FHA in Chapter 3. Chapter 3 in my book is about the Great Depression. And the FHA invented redlining. A lot of people don't know that. Redlining, for people who don't understand, or who haven't heard of it, is when banks decide that they're not going to make a loan to you because you live within a certain area code or you live within a certain neighborhood. And if you look at a map, it's almost as if the banker drew a red line to divide neighborhoods, to know which ones to avoid and which ones to serve. And it didn't matter what your credit history was or your financial situation. If you lived in a certain neighborhood that was being redlined or blackballed, you wouldn't get a loan. And the Federal Housing Administration was the originator of redlining. And what they are is they're an insurer. They're a government agency that insures mortgages. So a lender, a bank, let's say J.P. Morgan, wants to make a loan, a home loan, to someone that lives in a neighborhood, and they want the Federal Housing Administration to insure that loan. The Federal Housing Administration will say, we don't insure loans in that neighborhood. We'll insure loans in this neighborhood over here, but that neighborhood that you were targeting, there's too many blacks, or there's too many immigrants, too many Hispanics, too many Asians, or whomever. We don't go there. And so what happens is the lenders, the banks who are making the loans, will steer loans away or choose not to make loans to people in a certain neighborhood, because if they did, they would not be insured by the Federal Housing Administration. So they created redlining, and it continued for 30 years. It wasn't outlawed until 1968. The Federal Housing Administration goes back to 1934, I think. And they had a policy where they could redline as much as they wanted all day long until 1968 with the Fair Housing Act outlawed redlining. So redlining was a government idea. And, but like you said, even without the Federal Housing Administration, people were more able to pay cash for their homes. You buy a house, and you could get, you make a bigger down payment, and you could get a smaller loan, or you could pay cash for your house. Well, who does that now? I mean, unless you're very wealthy, multi-millionaire, you got hundreds of thousands of dollars just lying around, almost nobody pays cash for a home. They have to get a mortgage. And by the way, a 30-year mortgage in many cases, if not most cases. I will never get a 30-year mortgage. I see it as a ripoff. The reason is because it's amortized. You know about mortgages. I know you've bought and sold houses in your career. Mm-hmm. And you know that the way that a 30-year mortgage is amortized is that you start off paying a payment. Let's say the payment's $1,000 a month. Very easily, 950 of those $1,000 is interest, and the other 50 is principal. And it decreases by pennies per month. It's not until you're halfway through the loan that you actually start paying a larger percentage of your principal off. So you're basically giving the bank so much interest over the course of the entire loan. You could end up borrowing, for example, $70,000 for a house and end up paying the bank over $240,000 back in interest, because the interest is really where the bank's making money off of you. You borrow $70,000 and you pay back $240,000. So you're paying back anywhere between triple to quadruple what you borrowed. That's a ripoff. That's a predatory loan, in my opinion. And that was created during the Great Depression to help people own homes. I want people to know the best way to own a home is with a free market. Get rid of all this excess financing. Get rid of all these regulations on building a home. Home builders are incredibly regulated by the local municipalities. They have to pay taxes. They have to get insurance. They have to get permits. They have so many different regulations that prevent them from building a home. Depending on which state you go to, it can take years for you to build new houses, new apartments. California is one of the worst. California, I've heard it can take a decade or more to build a particular establishment, depending on what you want to do with it, where you want to build it. You go to Texas, on the other hand, and you can do in months what it will take you years to do in California as far as building a home. You know what happened during the 2000s? Home prices actually did not rise very much in Texas. They rose at a rate of 3% a year between 2002 and 2006. You know how much they rose in California? They rose at a rate of 31% per year during that same period. Compare that with Texas, 3% a year from 2002 to 2006, 31% a year during that same period in California. What was the difference between Texas and California? Texas has very loose land regulations. Very loose, much easier to build a house in Texas. In California, very strict. Lots of environmental regulations, lots of regulations concerning land, how land is supposed to appear. It's just so many different, just so many different rules for what you can do with land in California. And so when the housing bubble began, it bubbled up in California many, many times more than it did in Texas. And then when everything crashed, it crashed way more in California. Home prices dropped at a rate of 14% per year between 2006 and 2009. In Texas, it only dropped 3% a year. So if you want to make houses more affordable, you want to make real estate more affordable, you have to get the government out of regulating land and how it's used. At the same time, get rid of excess financing, because too much financing creates inflation. Too much money flowing after too few goods creates inflation. And if you have too much money being loaned out, like we had during the 2000s with the subprime mortgages, people with no job, without, no credit history, no money down, were getting home loans. That's why home prices shot through the roof. Just too much money. So you have to, and that goes back to a monetary system that creates too much money, a banking system that creates too much money. And by the way, I talk about banks in Chapter 2 and Chapter 3 and throughout the book. But banks create money too. It's not just the government. Banks create money too, and they do something called fractional reserve lending, which I don't want to get too far off on that, but we can always talk about that. But basically, if you have a system that creates too much money, you're going to have too much home inflation, home price inflation. If you have too many regulations on how you can build a house, when and where you can build a house, then you're going to have a situation where you can't build enough houses to serve the people, and as a result, the price will go through the roof. And you can compare states and see who has the most home price inflation and who has the least, and who has the most rules for building a home and who has the least. And I guarantee you in every case, those with the most rules are going to have the highest level of inflation.
Wow. And it's so funny because those are typically your big-time liberal states, right? And we think about liberals as these nice, caring people who they want to take care of everybody, and they're very inclusive. But I've come to find out there's some of the most grimy, some of the most scammy, some of the most just manipulative people out there. I mean, honestly, not all of them, right? Not all of them, but when we talk about regulation and how they use laws, that's how they really they can be sometimes, especially again when you just got talking about California. And they're some of the most oppressive states too. I mean, when you talk about criminal law and things like that. John, talk a little bit about criminal law. Talk a little bit about the fact that how government, particularly liberal government, that creates all of these laws, happens to create the not only income inequality, but the justice system inequality that they are saying they're fighting against, but they create with the laws that they push.
Well, yeah, I think there was a Chinese philosopher who said the more laws you have, the more criminals you'll have. It's that simple. I think Joseph Stalin or someone from his government said, show me the man and I will show you the crime. If you have too many rules, you can make a criminal out of anyone. People end up breaking laws that they didn't even know existed. It's unbelievable, the idea that, there are laws on the books that the lawmakers themselves don't even know exist. If you go to, I think there's a site called dumblaws.com or something like that, and it's the laws that go back many generations that are still on the books now. They're not enforced because nobody wants to enforce them because they are from an older period and they deal with things that we don't even deal with anymore, but they're still on the books. And you're dealing with progressive states, New York, any state in the Northeast, any state on the West Coast. These are basically your progressive strongholds. These are states where you pretty much can't do anything unless you get permission or you get some kind of clearance from a government, whether it's a local or state level government. And it's if you look at homeschooling, for example, the most regulated part of the country when it comes to homeschooling is the Northeast. And they have layer upon layer upon layer of what you have to do in order to even start homeschooling. It's unlike any other part of the country. Every other state in the country has either a moderate, low, or no regulation on homeschooling. If you go to the Northeast, almost every state in the Northeast has a high level of regulation. And that comes from an organization. I have this example in my book where I talk about education and the people, the people who actually assess levels of regulation across the country. They have identified northeastern states as having far more regulation when it comes to homeschooling than any parts of the country. And you know what else is also true is that northeastern states are more likely to be segregated. Their schools are more likely to be segregated. And the reason is because public education is more dominant there. Public education is controlled by government. People go to schools based on where they live, not based on their ability to pay for the education. The organization that actually looks at regulation is called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. When it comes to homeschool regulation, it's called the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And out of the 9 northeastern states, 5 of them are marked as high regulation. Every other state in the country is marked moderate, low, or no regulation whatsoever for homeschooling. So these are, again, state governments regulating. If you want to go to a place in the country where you're going to be smothered in government more than anywhere else, you go to the Northeast or you go to the West Coast, and you have a few states in the middle, maybe Colorado, although Colorado's made a lot of progress in other areas, but you go to states like Hawaii or Illinois, very, very heavily regulated. So when we talk about government, we've got to remember there's 3 different layers. There's your, and local government can have even more intrusive regulations than state government, and state government has more intrusive regulations than federal government. Local government will basically say you can't, there's a certain height your grass has to be, you can't add a room or a deck to your home without a permit. These are local government ordinances. So when you're talking about progressivism and you're talking about excess government, mainly state and local level is where you find the most of it.
Oh, wow. And we want to make it clear, John, because a lot of people will listen to this and they'll say, well, you guys are conservative, you're Republicans, right? Speak to the fact that you're not talking about Republicans here. You're not advocating people or black people to go out and vote, particularly black people, because we're the ones that are, you know, we just go, whoever's got the D next to their name, that's the one you check mark. That's where a lot of us are trained to do. Explain that you don't believe the Republicans are the answer as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, both the Democratic and Republican parties are guilty in taking this country to where it is. The Republicans, the difference between the Democrats and the Republicans is that the Democrats pretty much just tell you who they are. They believe in more government. They believe in taxes on the rich, higher taxes. They believe in socialism. They believe in everyone should have a right to a job and a home and health care and an education and a good wage, and they want everyone to have everything. They tell you who they are. The Republicans are frauds. They tell you that they're for smaller government, cutting taxes, less spending, more freedom, but they don't actually do any of that. They don't actually legislate like that. They tell you what they say they're about, but they do the opposite of what they say they're about, which is the reason why we could not get Obamacare repealed. And I talk about Obamacare in my book. Boy, the Republicans wouldn't let that go for 8 years. When Obamacare was passed in 2010, the Republicans said, this is rule number 1. Everybody get on board so that we can repeal Obamacare. And they tried and they tried and they tried. They couldn't get it repealed with the Democrats controlling the Senate. They couldn't get it repealed with Obama as president. But when Donald Trump came in last year and he said, I will sign a bill that repeals Obamacare, the Republicans had control of the House, they had control of the Senate, they had control of the White House, and they voted on repealing Obamacare multiple times, and they failed in every single case because they really don't believe in doing that. They don't believe in what they proclaim to believe in. So the difference between the two is that the Democrats at least are honest and they tell you who they are. The Republicans are frauds. They do the opposite of what they say. And therefore, our country continues to pile on debt. We continue to see economic growth slow down more and more. It doesn't even matter who's in power, Democrat or Republican. We continue to stay the course right into economic destruction. Therefore, voting for a Democrat or a Republican is no good. And I would not encourage anyone to vote for a Democrat or Republican. Now, here's what I would encourage, because you got to always have a solution. If you want to talk about what not to do, you got to always follow up by saying what to do. Mm-hmm. So I say vote for someone who has a track record of voting or working on behalf of those who are trying to get smaller government. Because if you just look at the rhetoric, if you just look at what people say in a campaign commercial or in a political debate or on the floor of the House or Senate on C-SPAN, you're really not getting the truth. All you're getting is what they think you will believe at that moment. You got to look at somebody's history. You got to look at their track record. The Republicans have a track record of doing the same thing that the Democrats do. They will sign a spending bill that adds trillions to the debt just to make sure the government doesn't shut down. They will sign a spending bill if they feel it's going to prevent the government from defaulting. They will not cut Social Security or Medicare. They will not reform entitlement programs. And when they pass a tax cut bill, it's not going to be fair. It's not going to have big tax cuts for everyone. They say we want to get rid of Obamacare. They won't get rid of it. They say, oh, the tax code is 75,000 pages, and it's so complex, and nobody understands it, and we want to simplify it, and they will never get around to actually simplifying it. They talk the biggest game in the world, and they do nothing. So I would say vote for a libertarian, and the only way you can know who a libertarian is, look at their history. The greatest libertarian of our time, Ron Paul. I wish he was around. I mean, he retired 5 years ago. His son is in the Congress now. His name is Rand Paul. He's in the Congress now. He's a senator from Kentucky. He's the only person who I think is worth anybody's vote in the whole Congress. And unfortunately, there's only one of him, because he's the only libertarian I see in the Congress. Other than that, I mean, if you want to know who the libertarians are, you got to look at someone's history. And, the Internet's a great place to go. YouTube videos are everywhere. You can Google up, look at your own senators and congressmen from your state. And look at the history of what they voted for and what they believe in, and go on YouTube and look at videos of what they say on the Senate floor and the House floor. And just, people have to actually know who these people are, because if they just go based on what a TV ad says or what the person said yesterday or last year, they're not going to know who they're voting for. But I would say forget Democrats or Republicans. Go for the libertarians, the people who talk about freedom, who have a track record of actually promoting freedom, voting for freedom, voting for true cuts in taxes, who are saying, in other words, people got to do their research. And that's the only way people can actually know who to vote for. But steer clear of these two main parties, because they're both no good.
Absolutely. Interesting. And John, before we wrap things up here, just a few more questions. And guys, if you have a question for John, put it in the chat room right now. Last few moments I have with him, and we're going to have him back on the show. We're going to incorporate him as our main go-to guy when things happen in Washington, and we kind of need at least some kind of explanation and what they mean to our country. John, when it comes to Social Security, right? I remember in middle school it being a conversation with George W. Bush wanting to, quote unquote, put Social Security on Wall Street. I don't remember the policy in detail, but is Social Security, obviously we don't have the money to keep paying for it, but what is there anything we can do to save it, or is it basically going to be that one thing that's going to end up eventually bankrupting us and leading to the Great Depression?
Oh, well, you just said it. Social Security. There is, I think, somewhere between 11 to 12 trillion dollars of unfunded Social Security benefits. We cannot afford to pay for that. I talk about Social Security in my books. Really, what I would like to see is a system where what we do for people who are not collecting Social Security benefits because they're not old enough, you have to do two things. You have to raise the age progressively, and I can talk about that, what that means, but you have to raise the age and you have to cut future benefits. Now, if you're, let's say, 70 years old and you're already collecting, I wouldn't support cutting anybody's benefits who are already collecting right now. But if you are not collecting, let's say you're a few years away, let's say you're 63 years old and you're not collecting Social Security until 3 years from now, I would say you raise the age maybe a couple years, cut future benefits by 10%, 20%, I don't know. That's something that's negotiable. But each generation needs to see its age go up higher, its benefit collection age go up higher. Each generation also needs to see the amount of benefits it collects go down lower. So, for example, our grandparents, who are probably already if they're still alive, they're probably already collecting, no change. Just let them continue to collect. Our parents who are maybe not collecting, but maybe a few years away from collecting, raise the age maybe 3 years, or 4 years, or 5 years, and cut their benefits maybe 10 or 20% or 30%. People in our age group or our generation would have to see the age go up maybe by 10 or 15 years, and then you cut the benefits maybe 30% or 40% or whatever. Let's say our children, for those of us who have children, the age would have to rise maybe 30 years. And the benefits might have to be cut 50 or 60 or 70%. Now, what I'm getting at is I want a situation where people stop looking to Social Security to subsidize their income. I want people in the future, I want the younger generations to say, I am going to invest in my own retirement because I'm not going to be old enough to collect Social Security because the age has been moved up to 99 years old, and I'm only going to collect maybe $100 a month. I want a situation where people stop looking to the government to protect them. I want to make the Social Security program obsolete. I want to make it to where it's not serving as many people in the future. And then, as people start investing in their own retirement and they stop looking to Social Security because the program is serving fewer people, then we will eventually get to a place where Social Security is not needed anymore because it's not serving anybody anymore, because the age is too high, the benefits are too low. And then what we can do is we can abolish Social Security, and by doing that we can get rid of the Social Security payroll tax. We all pay Social Security taxes, but we will not all collect. It isn't fair, it isn't right, and I don't want people to keep depending on Social Security for the future. What people misunderstand is that most people were never supposed to collect Social Security. Social Security was for people who outlived their expected lifetime by 5 years. In 1935, when it was created, people were expected to live until age 60. They set the retirement age or the benefit collection age at 65. The reason was because they understood that most people will not live to 65. Therefore, most people will not collect. For those who do live to 65, they'll collect for maybe a year or two and then die. That made the program solid. That made it to where it wouldn't bankrupt people. But then, as people continued to live longer and longer, nobody wanted to move the retirement age up in line with life expectancy because it's politically unpopular. And so what happens now is we have a situation where most people are going to collect Social Security, and most people are going to hold on to it for 10, 20, or even 30 or more years. And that's the reason why it's a program that really it cannot be saved. Social Security cannot be saved. It has to be cut down over time because it was never, ever intended to be a pension. It was never intended to be a retirement program. It was old age insurance for people who didn't die when they were supposed to. And it has not, the program has not been modified to conform to new lifestyles. It has not been changed to adapt to our culture of living into our 80s and 90s. And so that's the reason why it just can't be sustained, unless, of course, you were to move the age up to 85, and reduce benefits. Maybe you could possibly make the program last for a lot longer, but I also disagree with the idea that my money, my tax dollars, should go to pay for somebody else's living without my permission. Nobody should have the right to your money. And that's what Social Security does. It reaches into your pocket without your consent, takes money out, and that money is not being used to invest in you. Money that you pay into Social Security is not helping you. It is helping somebody who's already on Social Security. That's called a Ponzi scheme. That's what put Bernie Madoff in jail, where you are collecting money from one investor or from one payer, and it goes to another investor, or it goes to another payer. And it's unsustainable, and that's the reason every Ponzi scheme collapses. And Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, and that's the reason why it is bankrupting us now, and it will continue to bankrupt us even more so. We have to get away from the idea of Social Security. We have to get to a world where Social Security from the government does not exist, because if it exists, it will only exist until it collapses. And we are about to get to that point. I would say over the next 20 or so years, it will collapse.
Wow. Yeah, man, so many people in the financial space have been talking about the end of government, or as we see it, and we know that's coming, and we'll definitely get into that more. Going into questions, I had someone say, can you talk a little bit about why schools in Arizona are really bad? Are you familiar with the schools in Arizona, or how they work out there?
Well, as far as specifically schools from Arizona, I would say public schools throughout the country are pretty much very similar. There are differences. Arizona is very close to, Arizona is a state that borders Mexico. So there are going to be issues there that states that don't border Mexico or that are not in that region don't have to deal with. I would say this: you have a lot of immigration, and I'm all for. Immigration is one of our strengths. What I don't believe in is a situation where you have people coming into this country who don't want to assimilate, and then they get the government to conform to them. So, for example, English we don't have an official language, but English is the dominant language of this country. And during the Industrial Revolution, we had lots of immigrants from Europe who didn't speak a word of English. They came here and they understood that if they were going to make it in this world, if they were going to be successful in our country, they had to learn English, and they did. On the southern border, you have a lot of schools in which they are not teaching English. Public schools. Now, if it's a private school, I don't care what they do. But if it's a public, taxpayer-funded school, and you have immigrants from Latin America who don't know English and don't want to learn English coming and getting an education, and the government chooses to get teachers who speak Spanish, now you have a situation where the government is actually being put in a position where it is conforming to the language or culture of another country. I don't support that. I don't believe the government should be involved in educating people, because once you get the government involved, then it becomes a matter of who controls it. And I don't know exactly how bad the situation is, but I would believe that the states that border the Mexico border have a bigger problem with English than any other state in this country, except for, maybe Florida. But when you're dealing with public education, you're always going to have more problems than when you have private education. The worst schools in this country are public schools. And that's not to say that there aren't good public schools. There are lots of good public schools, I know for sure. But if you were to look at the top 20 schools in America, you will probably find mostly private, charter, maybe one or two public schools here or there. If you were to look at the bottom 20, you're not going to find a single private school. You're not going to find a single charter school. You will find all public schools in the bottom 20. We have thousands of schools in this country. But look at the top 20, look at the bottom 20, and you will see a big difference in the makeup of those two tiers of schools in our country.
Wow, thank you for that. And that comes from Bad Scientist saying thank you for answering his question. John, I have a question about military spending. Do you believe that there's a role for government there, and do you believe that all of us should pay towards that?
I do believe that we should have a military for protection against foreign threats. There were a few times in our history where we did have to use the military. If you don't count the revolution, that doesn't really count. But after we established our first government, we did have the War of 1812. We had Great Britain, who was funding attacks on us from the Native American populations, interfering with our shipping, with our trade. They were taking sailors off our boats, off our ships, and using them for their own war against France, their own empire. That was an attack against our country. So I think the War of 1812 was a justified war. World War I was basically the same situation. World War II, we were attacked. So there are situations where we do need to have a military, and where we do need to have funding for that. Now, the budget that we have today is ridiculous. We have bases in most countries of the world, and we don't have bases there because we're trying to protect anyone. We have bases all over the world because we believe we should run the world. We believe we should police the world. And this is exactly what the Founding Fathers said don't do. They did not want permanent alliances with any nation. They did not want a global empire. They did not want us interfering in the politics of foreign countries. There is no reason for us to have troops in Germany. That war, as far as I know, ended over 70 years ago. We should not have tens of thousands of troops in Germany. We should not have a single base there. Same thing with Japan. That war ended at the same time. Same thing with Korea. We should not have any troops there. We should not have any troops in the Middle East. We have so many problems with terrorism because of our troops in the Middle East. And once we put down a base, we never leave. We never close it up and say our work is done. We are about to be entering our 18th year in Afghanistan, the longest war in our history. I have no idea what we're doing there anymore. We're just kind of trying to keep the peace of that. I mean, what other purpose would we be in Afghanistan for? It is a complete waste of resources. We have no purpose there other than to basically be police officers. And it should not be our business to keep the peace in a foreign country. That's why that foreign country has a government. It's their job to keep the peace. It's the job of Afghanistan to keep the peace in Afghanistan. It's the job of Iraq to keep the peace in Iraq. It's the job of Syria to keep the peace in Syria. It shouldn't be our job, and it's costing a fortune. And, you know, we and our founders warned us. They warned us about this. But there are those very rare situations where we could face a foreign attack. So should we have a military? Absolutely. And that military should be funded. But to have bases and aircraft carriers floating all throughout the world, battleships in every strait and every sea across the world, and it's costing, 20% of our $4 trillion budget, absolutely not. We should just pack up and come back home and not use our military unless we are attacked.
Interesting. Yeah, I heard someone in the chat room saying it's called, we have a, quote, strategic interest in doing that. Do you have anything to say on that? Or?
Well, that's exactly what the founders wanted us not to get involved in. Strategic this and strategic that. Once you start getting into these alliances, you start getting into geopolitics, you start getting into, trying to make sure this country doesn't do this or that, it's a black hole. You go deeper and you don't know where you're going to end up. All you're going to know is that you're going to end up spending more money over time. You're going to put troops in harm's way. You're going to possibly spark the next war, which would not be in our interests. Strategic interest, this is not the way we thought during the 18th, 19th, and early 20th century. We said we're going to protect ourselves. We're going to keep to ourselves. We're not going to get involved in the rest of the world until the rest of the world gets involved with us. And I guarantee you, if you look at all the wars that are taking place in the world, none of them really pose a threat to us. None of the conflicts that we are involved in we got involved in because of a national security interest. The government officials like to say that, but really it's about control, it's about dominance. Our history since World War II has been a history of intervening in areas where politics wasn't going our way. But we need to learn. That's how the world is. A lot of things don't go our way. We need to accept that. We need to quit saying that, oh man, we didn't get that president elected in that other country. We need to overthrow him and put our man in there. We have a history. The CIA has a history of doing this. The CIA was formed after World War II to fight the Cold War. The CIA was responsible for overthrowing presidents, democratically elected presidents in foreign countries, because they were electing people who are sympathetic to the Soviet Union, who are nationalizing Western companies. We just need to understand that when we get involved in foreign politics, all it does is create more problems down the road for us. And when we kept to ourselves from the late 18th century to the early 20th century, when we kept to ourselves, our economy grew more. We had a longer period of peace regarding foreign nations than ever. Life was simply better for us. Now it seems like we can't do much anymore because we're stuck all over the world. We can't cut our military budget because we're stuck in over 170 countries. We can't seem to make any progress on world peace because we have to make deals with countries, and if anyone reneges on a promise, then we're obligated to punish them or put sanctions on them or do something that could provoke them. The best policy is to not interfere in foreign politics.
Well said, well said, well said. Wow, okay, I'm scrolling here. Any last questions? Someone saying, "Oh, the military-industrial complex, oil." We would have been way off of oil by now if we had a free market system. I think that's relatively clear. Big government plays a part in the fact that we still use fossil fuels. Let me see here. Anything else? Well, John, is there anything else you kind of want to put out there for the people to see? And by the way, guys, I have his book, the link to his book in the description. His book is less than $20. It's not one of these 90-page ebooks, ladies and gentlemen. This is a 400-page book, all right, that this man has taken several years to write. I remember, John, in my little small apartment in Dearborn, $450 a month, you telling me, I remember this was our dorm days, right? And you telling me,
yeah,
I'm going to write this book several years ago, and, you were working on it chapter after chapter. Now it's done. Over 400 pages of knowledge. This man's put his sweat and tears into this book. I really want you guys to take advantage and get this man, support this brother's book. Get that book right now on Amazon. Click the link, go buy it. Less than $20. But yeah, John, is there anything else you want to put out there?
Oh yeah, well, I do want. First of all, I want to thank you for this opportunity to just get the word out to the people about what this country is coming to and what to do about it. I want to inspire people to get active. A lot of people don't vote anymore. I think that is a tragedy. I want to inspire more people to say, you know what, my vote is powerful, and my vote does matter. If you look at the last presidential election, Donald Trump won because of 3 states, because of Michigan, because of Pennsylvania, and because of Wisconsin. 3 states that did not vote for a Republican since the 80s. And the margins of victories in those states was less than 70,000 votes in all 3 states. And I think in Michigan it was close to 10,000 votes. So I want people to know that if you really care about trying to change policy, you do have to do 2 things. You have to vote if you're not a voter. And if you are a voter, you have to treat your vote seriously. And look not just at the fact of whether or not someone's a Democrat or a Republican or black or white or a male or a female. Look at what is their track record, what is their history on the issues. Don't pay attention to a campaign commercial. Don't pay attention to a political campaign that was launched 6 months ago. Look at their history. because the history of someone will tell you more about who they are and what they believe than what they have been able to showcase over the last election cycle. We are where we are today because people are not involved, they're not paying attention, they are not really understanding what's going on out there. They just think that if they vote for a Democrat or Republican that their interests are protected. It's deeper than that. It's deeper than just, well, this guy said he's going to protect me, he's looking out for me. Everyone says that. Every person who runs for office is going to say, I'm fighting for you. I'm looking out, I'm trying to change things for the better. Everybody says that. You can't look at that. You got to dig into somebody. You've got to actually say, okay, what were they doing 10 years ago? What was their position on this issue 20 years ago, 15 years ago? Because everybody wants to tell you what you want to hear, true or false. And we have to dig beneath the surface and see who we are putting in office and what they're doing, and we have to learn about the issues. This country, I don't think, reads as much anymore, and yet books are a great way to help people learn, which is why I have mine out, which is why I really appreciate you promoting it and putting it out there, because this is how I learned. I used to know very little about this stuff. 10 years ago, I knew nothing about everything that I've put in this book. I knew nothing about how the world works, very, very little at best. And I was inspired by world events. I was inspired by national events to learn. And once I felt like I was learning and I was uncovering something deep and important, I wanted to share that with other people and help other people get involved and become a force for positive change in our country. Because without that, then we are simply doomed to go the way of every previous empire. Every empire that came before us, whether it was the Romans or the Persians or the Spanish or the British or the French or the Dutch, they all had global empires that went up in smoke. And they all went up in smoke for the same reason. They spent too much money. They tried to govern the world. They turned their back on freedom. They turned their back on prosperity. They debased their money. They had too many taxes, too many regulations. Their economy could not take it. And the day came, whether it was dozens of years later or hundreds of years later, the day came when everything had to crash because there was simply no way to sustain what they were doing. And we are doing the exact same thing they're doing. We are on the same path. I don't want our country to go in that direction, but it's already going in that direction. Can it be stopped? Can we actually turn around? Absolutely we can if people want to. If people get inspired to do something about this infinite growth of government, if they put the brakes on that, if they turn it around and go in the opposite direction when it comes to government, that is the only way we're going to restore America's greatness. And we don't have a lot of time. I don't see this country making it through this century. That might sound, grim, but I don't see this country making it through this century unless we do a complete U-turn in how we judge the role of government, in how we view the powers of those who are in political office. There is no other way to deal with this except through political activism, through voting, and through a change in how we look at government. So I want your people to know, say no to big government, grab my book, read it, cover to cover, study it. There's a lot of facts in there. There's a lot of numbers. There's a lot of statistics. But I also make it to where the average person can read it. I don't have a lot of academic. I don't want it to be too jargonesque, because that's not good for the average person to read. So it's easy reading. It's bigger. It's 12-point font, and it's made for the average person to understand. But educate yourselves as much as possible. There's other books out there too, but of course I want you to check mine out, check others out, fact check my book. My book is highly sourced. I've got, I think, 5 dozen pages of nothing but citations at the end of the book. Everything is sourced. So fact check my book. Look at everything I say, judge it, seek it out, and my hope is that when you get done with the book, you'll have a whole new view of what's happening in your country and be inspired to do the right thing.
Yes, indeed, man. Yes, indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the man I grew up with. Again, went to middle school, high school with. John, every room we've ever been in, I've always believed you the smartest guy in the room, bro. I've learned so much from you in our conversations over the years, and that's why I stay in touch with you, and I'm so excited about your future, man, as a speaker, as a lecturer. I think you're destined for big things, bro. I really believe it, and I'm so glad now the book is done. It's out there. I really think this is, the first step to a really big future for you. So shout out to Jonathan for coming in. And John, man, I don't know. I've been itching to ask you this question because I've been looking for a good lead-in because I wanted to get you out of here. I'm going to get you out of here.
Oh, yeah.
Police brutality, brother. What can, if anything, people do to solve the rampant amount of police brutality that's going on? I think you've answered it already with being politically engaged. I feel like that's probably the only solution at this point, but I want to hear from you.
Well, yeah, I think that one thing that we should all be able to agree on is we need to stop the drug war, because the drug war puts police on the doorsteps of so many people who really are not doing anything harmful. They simply are buying or selling or using a substance that the government declared illegal. And that was their only infraction. And doing that puts the police on the doorstep of every single home in America. We have taken this idea of drug prohibition, and I talk about drug prohibition. I have a whole section on that in Chapter 6 on why it's a true scourge in our country. But basically, the militarization of police has more to do with their approach to illegal substances than it does to any other crime, violent or not, in this country. And we have so many interactions that are negative with police because of the drug war, because we've made substances illegal that should not be illegal. So if you were to legalize all substances, regardless of what they are, you would cut down on the number of negative interactions that people have with police, I would say easily by half, and probably more than half, because so much of the jails are filled up with people who didn't really do anything that was immoral. They did things that were illegal, and we need to make a distinction between what is illegal and what is immoral. I think that what is illegal is not necessarily immoral, and unfortunately, what is immoral in many cases is not necessarily illegal. So we have to fix that. But legalization, and something else too, marijuana, which is one of many drugs that are illegal, that should be legal, has been gaining ground throughout the country. It would be a great move if the states were to legalize it. And even in our National Congress, there's a conversation about taking marijuana out the controlled substances list. I don't know if it's going to get done, but I hope it does, because we should not be putting the police on people's doorsteps, in people's homes, just because they ate something or drank something or smoked something for themselves. We need to understand that being in a free country means the right to use what you want for yourself. And you should not have to go to jail and have a ruined record and be a convicted felon just because you put something into your body. We should not have police using battering rams to break down doors because it was said, or that there was word that someone had a stash of this or that in someone's house. We need to definitely end this drug war once and for all. And as far as any other interactions with police that are negative, each case should be judged on its own merits, for sure. Every case is different. Every interaction is different. But a great way to cut down on it, get rid of a lot of these regulations that are putting police right on our doorsteps.
Wow. Excellent, guys. And people are saying, well, I mean, won't that legalize very harmful, dangerous drugs and whatnot? But yeah, let those people who want to use it, again, it goes back to immorality and illegality. So let those people who want to, use cocaine, let them use it. If they want to do that, let them do that.
And something else, just to piggyback on what you just said there, the most dangerous drugs never existed before Prohibition. We've got heroin today that's being combined with fentanyl and carfentanil. It's killing people at the highest rates in history. And the reason why that is because when you make a drug illegal that people want to use, or you make a substance illegal that people want to use, what the drug suppliers do is they have to make the drug stronger. The reason is because when you make something illegal, you're making it more expensive, because the police can now take it away. The police can now lock you up. They can take your supplies off the market, and therefore the drug gets more expensive. What the drug suppliers do in response to that is they have to make the drug stronger so that it can become cheaper. By making it stronger, they're making it more dangerous. Crack, for example, did not exist until the 1980s. Yet cocaine existed for a century before that. Cocaine is the reason why we had Coca-Cola back in the 1880s. When people drank Coca-Cola back then, they did not die of an overdose from cocaine. In fact, it was an energy drink, and there was very little cocaine in it. But it was made illegal. And the reason it was made illegal was because there was fear that it was making black men rape white women.
Right.
All the drug laws are based in racism. Mm-hmm. Laws against marijuana were designed to target Latinos. Laws against cocaine were designed to target African Americans. Laws against opium were designed to target Asian Americans. When we outlawed opium, a stronger form of opium came on the market. It was called morphine. Then we outlawed that. What happened was heroin came on the market. Then we outlawed that. And then what happened is now heroin, stronger forms of it came on the market, and it's being combined with all these other things. It's laced with something that's very dangerous. We are making drugs more dangerous by outlawing them. And if you look at marijuana in a state like Colorado where it's legal is much safer than in a state where it is illegal, like Kentucky, for example. I would never want to buy marijuana in Kentucky because it's legal. They don't even have recreational marijuana. I mean medical. That's what I mean. Mm. They don't even have medical. They don't even allow you to have medical marijuana in Kentucky. So any marijuana you buy is going to be off the street It's going to be dangerous. You won't know what's in it. It's going to have a higher level of THC in it because it's being made stronger to make it cheaper and more profitable. But I would love to buy marijuana in Colorado where it's labeled, where you actually know what the THC content is, you know what you're buying, you know how much to eat or drink or whatever. Drugs are safer in an environment where they're legal. They're more dangerous in an environment where they're illegal. And you can look at alcohol in the 1920s and see the exact same thing. Alcohol became more poisonous, more toxic, more likely to kill you if you drank it during Prohibition than it was before or after Prohibition. And again, the reason is because when you prohibit a substance that people want, that makes it more expensive because the police can take it away. By making it more expensive, the suppliers of that substance make it stronger so that they can bring the cost down, so that they can bring their profits up. And by doing that, they make the drug more dangerous to consume, more addictive. I talk about this in great depth in Chapter 6 in a section called The Scourge of Prohibition. So you'll learn a whole lot from that, why the best thing we could do is legalize every single substance, and we will see the most dangerous drugs go away. If we legalized coca, you're going to see crack go away. You're going to see the most dangerous forms of cocaine go away. If we legalize opium, you're going to see the most dangerous forms of heroin go away. If you legalized marijuana, you're going to see the most strongest possible strains of marijuana go away. We need to recognize that it isn't the government's business to protect us from our own decisions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And John, I've seen you, basically destroy any of these black liberals that try to come after you. These cooperative, communist, basically leaning types. They're gonna come after you, John. I mean, now that this book is out, you go beyond just a guy who's got really great ideas. Now you're published. Now you're out there. Now you're going to be making waves, more than likely predominantly within the black community first, right? I have no doubt you're going to be the foremost intellectual of our generation in regards to, libertarian, neoclassical economic thought. I have no doubt about that. I don't think you have any competition there. For that matter, is there anything you have to say to the brainwashed black liberal? I mean, I don't know how else to put it, but I mean, I think this is what a time to be alive, John, because there's a reawakening of thought, right? Of the idea, like, we can think for ourselves. Like, let's read some books. Let's talk about money. Let's talk about government. Let's talk. It's coming. And Kanye West is just really, he's really just kind of scratching the surface on that, and just that interest alone highlights why I think it's such a great time to be alive and black in America right now when we talk about politics and economics and our role in it. Is there anything you've got to say to those people who are kind of still and who are listening to this but still in the dark?
Yeah, I would say look at your own situation and make a judgment as to if you are satisfied with the state of economic affairs in this country. I would say to those people, look at how much more you have to pay for rent. Look at how much you have to pay for health care. Look at how much more you have to pay for a college education. Look at how much more you have to pay for food, how much harder life is getting for you economically. And ask yourself, have you actually delved into why it seems like life is getting harder and harder for you? I would say, ask yourself, have you ever wondered why it seems like everything just gets more expensive and it doesn't seem to make sense? Have you ever wondered why the middle class of this country, which used to be number one, which used to be in its glory days, has deteriorated so much? Why it seems like you can't find a job, or you can't find a good paying job, or it seems like you can't afford your prescription medications. I would tell those people, investigate more than one source. Do not just look at one source. I am not the only one to have written a book about this. Other people have written great books. I have learned from other people. My book contains information from other books. So I do not proclaim to be the only one here shining a light on what's going on. But I would say to people, do not trust a single source of information. Because if you do that, then you're at the mercy of whether or not that person intends to deceive you. And there are those who are intending to deceive. There are those who want to manipulate you. Do not put yourself at the mercy of a single source of information. Expand beyond just one, whether it's a TV channel, whether it is a book, whether it's a YouTube channel or a video. Definitely check out multiple sources of information. And that's one of the great things about this country, is that you do not have to just eat up what the state feeds you. I'm so glad I do not live in, say, North Korea or Cuba. I would never have dared to write this book if I lived in a country where I could be killed or put in jail because I criticized the government, because I said that the government is not your friend, is not helping you. But because I live in a country like this, I was free to produce this. And I would say, take advantage of your freedom. Take advantage of your liberty. Take advantage of all this media that you have. Take advantage of all of the fact that you can go to Amazon at the click of a button on your phone and order a book and have it sent to you within days. Or watch a video at the click of a button on YouTube on your phone or on your TV. Take advantage of the sources that you have, and do not put yourself at the mercy of a single source. Because if you do, then you are going to, you're putting yourself in a position where you are going to only get the truth by chance, and it's a very low chance.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great way to end it. And guys, if you love my show, please, 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 please. You guys know I never ask you guys for anything, but order my brother's book. This man deserves every penny. He is really a gift, y'all. He is a gift, and I'm telling you right now, this is going to be a guy you're going to be really excited to see grow over time, man. This has been a labor of love for him. He's put in a lot of work. I've seen it, a lot of work into this book. Support this brother. It's less than $20. Over 400 pages, less than $20. Go on Amazon right now. The name of the book is called Say No to Big Government, My Case for Maximum Freedom. I got the link in the description. I don't ask you guys for anything, but go to Amazon, go to that link, buy this man's book. Give it to somebody who's living in the dark. Give it to somebody read it for yourself. Give it to somebody who's just crazy about communism, who's living who's just out of his mind, Kanye West needs to read that book. You know what I'm saying? He needs to read that
Absolutely.
book. So, John, we're going to have you coming back regularly, man. You know, our government, I don't know, this guy's, basically on the, he's practically probably be getting impeached. I don't know what's going on with our government, but we're going to have you back and forth, interacting with us and answering the things that are happening in our government, bro. And again, thank you so much for coming on the show, man.
Oh, I really appreciate it, and I look forward to the future, as the news continues to turn and we start seeing more things develop in our country. I would definitely love to give my take on what's happening and what we should do about it.
Absolutely. And, John, can people go ahead and, because I hear somebody would love to have an autographed copy. They're willing to pay $50 to $75 if you wanted for an audit. Are you willing to let people maybe add you on Facebook? Are you cool with that? I mean, is there anywhere else to possibly?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, I am. So, yeah, you can, my name is, you have my name on my profile picture is the cover of my book. So for people who want to know, because there are multiple profiles with my name on it, but of course they're not all me. So anyone who's looking for me, just look for my name, and in the profile picture, my name, Jonathan Bogan, and in the profile picture is my book cover. I don't know if you said you have a copy of the book with you?
I don't have it with me. I just ordered it myself, John. You sent me the link a day ago, so I just ordered it myself. So I can't wait till it gets here.
Okay.
I'm supposed to get it tomorrow, so I can't wait.
Okay, well, yeah, definitely when you get a copy and you show it to your people, they'll know exactly what to look for. But my profile picture is the cover of my book. And I also have a group on Facebook called No Capitalism. The word no is K-N-O-W, meaning knowing capitalism. That's the title of my group. It's called No Capitalism, meaning know what capitalism is. And it's a picture of gold, like gold coins and a gold bar. And that's a group that people can join, but people can also join my Facebook page. And I have a profile picture with the cover on it. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'm definitely all for spreading the word and getting networked out there to make sure that people are getting connected with the truth, getting connected with sources of information that are actually going to lead them in the right direction.
Absolutely. And, John, are you on Twitter right now?
I am not on Twitter, but I can definitely look at getting on Twitter.
Absolutely,
I have not gotten on Twitter.
Absolutely. Your content and what you're putting out would be perfect for that particular medium especially, man. I think that would be really where you would shine, even better than Facebook. Facebook's important too, but Twitter would be hot for you. Twitter, Instagram, definitely out there, bro. And if you ever need any help with that, let me know. But again, guys, thank you so much for watching Jonathan Bogan. Again, go get that book. I'm going to say it over again. Get that book. Support this brother's journey to open people's eyes to this kind of information, guys, and get people out of the dark about their circumstances, really understanding how economics and freedom can really improve their livelihood, improve their situation in life, because we got a lot of people out here who think all they got to do is work harder and hustle and all that bullshit. The laws are created to hold these people down, and they have no idea, and they think working harder is going to make their lives better, and it's just not. It's just not, okay? It's just not. And unless you born into money or something like that, life is only going to get worse for you, especially if you're someone of very little means. And again, John, thank you so much, and we'll talk a little bit later off the show, okay?
I appreciate it, Marcel, and I look forward to our next time to get on the air.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, John. Let me go ahead and let you go there. And there it is, folks. And I want to, again, man, thank all of you guys who stuck it in for the whole show. I appreciate all of you guys, man. I appreciate all of you guys. I hope you loved my guest. That's the kind of people I want to have on the show, man. That's the people I want to have on the show. That's the kind of people I've surrounded myself with throughout my life. Brothers who think deeper, who just, it's no bullshit. You're going to get something that's going to feed you, that's going to energize you, that's going to awaken you. We get one life. You got to really surround yourself with people who are going to empower you, right? And I don't surround myself with jokers and clowns. I like people like John, man. I like surrounding myself with people who think big, who are seeing problems and then understanding solutions, All right, that's why it's kind of hard to get guests on, because I don't want just anybody. I really want people who are going to leave you with feeling like, okay, I learned something today. All right. So with that being said, I know we didn't do too much triggers and all that. It is what it is. I think we got even a better lesson. So let me go ahead and end the show as I do. You already know what it is. Appreciate you for joining me. And we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow to wrap up the week, and we'll go through all the other tickers that we probably could have talked about today, but we'll talk about them tomorrow at the end of the week. Gold Hill Trader, appreciate you, man. Bat Scientist, you said 30 more minutes. Man, let's absorb what we just got. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be back tonight. Donzel Essex, appreciate you. Shaquille, Emmanuel, No Place Like NYC, I appreciate you. Yes, sir. Very smart man. Corey Kwan, Andrew Gladness, shout out to you. All the people who called in, Ken, Bat Scientist. I saw Mr. Lloyd in the building. Callie Rob. The Quickster, what's up, Legendary 8s, Mr. Money, appreciate you, bro. Georgia General, thank you. All the people watching on their flat screens who can't chat, appreciate you. Go get the book, support that brother. All right, that man he's putting out information that's going to change lives, man. That's information that's going to change lives, dude. All right, that's going to save lives. That's the kind of information that saves lives, guys. All right, saves families, creates families. We got to get that kind of information out, man. That's why I got to put him front and center. Monk man, appreciate you. Sal Baptiste, Ricardo Joseph. Until tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen, have a great night. Talk to you later.